Welcome to African Folktales by D. Elenas. Hit that subscribe button, give this video a thumbs up, and tell us in the comments where you're joining us from. Don't forget to turn on notifications so every story comes straight to you. She smiled at the wedding, but deep inside, something twisted. Adaku sat on the edge of the chair in her bright white gown, her hands trembling as she looked at her phone. Messages kept popping from Samuel, her husband-to-be. He had promised her love, loyalty, and happiness, but a strange tension had been building in the past weeks. The wedding hall glowed with lights and flowers. Guests laughed, clinked glasses, and shared warm greetings. But Adaku felt cold. She didn't know why, but a knot of fear and unease had settled in her stomach. Was it intuition, or a warning she couldn't ignore? Her best friend, Chika, leaned over, whispering, "Relax, Ada. You look perfect. Today is your day." Adaku forced a smile, but her eyes kept searching for Samuel. When he finally appeared, his confident smile made her heart flutter. Yet, she noticed something off. His gaze lingered longer than usual on her cousin, Amara, who had just arrived in a stunning blue gown. Adaku shook her head, dismissing the thought. She was being paranoid. Still, a whisper in her mind warned that tonight would not unfold the way she expected. Something unthinkable was waiting, silently, behind the smiles. The ceremony began beautifully, with laughter, music, and blessings filling the hall. Samuel stood at the altar, handsome and tall, as the pastor recited vows. Adaku's heart raced as she repeated her promises, but she couldn't shake the feeling that Samuel's smiles were forced. Each time he glanced at Amara, Adaku noticed the smallest flicker in his eyes, something that should not be there. The guests cheered as the couple exchanged rings, and the band started playing lively tunes. Drinks flowed, and guests danced, oblivious to the tension brewing quietly beneath the celebration. Adaku tried to focus on the joy, but the pit in her stomach deepened. During the reception, Samuel excused himself several times, leaving her to talk to family and friends. Adaku felt abandoned in the crowd, yet she held her composure. Chika squeezed her hand, whispering, "He's nervous. Don't let it ruin your happiness." Adaku nodded, but her mind kept returning to Amara. Why did Samuel keep glancing her way? And why did he seem uncomfortable near Adaku? Something in her heart whispered danger, but she tried to ignore it. The night was supposed to be perfect, but perfection, she realized, sometimes hides shadows that will destroy everything. After dinner, Samuel returned to Adaku, smiling politely. But there was a distance in his eyes she hadn't seen before. "Are you okay?" she asked softly. He nodded, brushing off her concern, but his attention seemed divided. Adaku noticed that he was texting someone constantly, glancing at the screen with a secretive smile. Her heart sank. The music played, couples danced, and laughter echoed, but her mind was trapped in unease. She tried to enjoy the moment, laughing politely at family jokes, but the tension gnawed at her. Chika noticed her distress. "Ada, he's just excited about tonight. Stop imagining things." Adaku tried to believe her, but deep down, a cold fear had settled. After a while, Samuel led her to the dance floor, and as they danced, Adaku saw Amara watching them intently, her smile almost to knowing. Something snapped inside Adaku. She had married the man she trusted, yet her instincts screamed betrayal. Samuel whispered compliments in her ear, but she no longer felt warmth. Instead, her mind raced with suspicion. The unthinkable seemed closer now, a shadow stretching over her joy. And in that moment, she realized that tonight, nothing would be the same. As the night grew darker, Adaku excused herself to the balcony to catch some air. The cool wind brushed against her face, but it did nothing to calm the turmoil inside her. From the corner of the balcony, she saw Samuel and Amara standing close, speaking softly, their heads nearly touching. Her heart hammered violently. Could she be imagining it? No, she thought, shaking her head. Her stomach churned, and the room suddenly felt empty. She wanted to scream, but her voice wouldn't work. The laughter inside the hall became distant, replaced by the pounding in her chest. Chika followed her, alarmed. "Ada, what's wrong?" Adaku forced herself to smile. "Nothing, Chika. I just needed a moment." But Chika's eyes were sharp, and she sensed the truth. "Ada, is he?" Adaku couldn't answer. Her hands trembled, and tears threatened to spill. From inside, the music played on, oblivious to her despair. Her cousin's laughter floated to the balcony. Every instinct screamed betrayal, yet she clung to denial. How could someone she loved so deeply betray her on the very night she was supposed to be happiest? And yet, everything she had feared was slowly, painfully revealing itself in the soft glow of the wedding lights. Adaku returned inside, forcing herself to smile at the guests and greet them warmly. But she could feel her face was pale, and her hands shook slightly. Samuel approached, holding her bouquet, and whispered, "You look beautiful tonight." She nodded, barely able to speak. Something in his eyes, a fleeting glance, told her everything she had feared. During the cake-cutting ceremony, Samuel leaned close, whispering, "I need to show you something." Adaku's stomach twisted, and she followed him toward the private lounge. There, he pulled out his phone and handed it to her. Confused, she glanced at the screen. Messages between him and Amara spilled across the screen, flirty, intimate, and undeniable. Adaku's world collapsed instantly. The words she had feared reading for weeks were now clear. Her husband-to-be had been in love with her cousin all along. Her hands trembled violently, and she staggered backward. Samuel tried to speak, but no words could undo the hurt. Adaku felt betrayed, humiliated, and utterly powerless. Her entire wedding, the smiles, the laughter, the vows, it had been a beautiful mask covering the cruel truth. She turned away, tears streaming silently. Guests were still celebrating, oblivious to the private nightmare unfolding in the lounge. In that moment, Adaku realized that the night she had dreamt about her entire life had become a scene of heartbreak she could never forget. Adaku ran to the empty garden outside the hall, gasping for air. The moonlight reflected off the polished marble, but it offered no comfort. Samuel appeared behind her, reaching out, but she stepped back, shaking her head. Chika caught up, holding her tightly. "Ada, what happened?" Adaku sobbed, finally speaking the words she had kept inside. "Here he loves Amara. He's been lying." Chika's eyes widened in shock. "Oh my God. On your wedding night?" Adaku nodded, shivering violently. Every dream she had nurtured for months now lay in ruins. Samuel knelt before her, begging, but the words sounded hollow, almost cruel. Adaku felt a rage she had never known rise inside her. Betrayal burned hotter than tears, and humiliation cut sharper than any blade. She realized she couldn't trust the man she had devoted her heart to. She also realized she couldn't confront him fully in public. The guests were still inside, unaware. The garden became her battlefield, a quiet place where anger and sorrow collided. Somewhere deep inside, she made a choice. She would not collapse entirely. She would not allow this betrayal to define her. But tonight, everything she had built, the trust, the love, the hope, was shattered, leaving a void filled only with pain. The hours passed slowly as the wedding hall emptied. Guests murmured about small mishaps and quietly left, unaware of the true scandal. Adaku remained in the garden, pacing back and forth, her white gown rustling with every step. Samuel's attempts to speak now sounded desperate and weak. He was no longer the confident man she had once admired. He was a guilty figure, shrinking under the weight of his own deceit. Chika whispered, "Ada, you can't stay here forever. You need to decide what to do." Adaku paused, staring at the glowing lights from the hall. Her heart felt heavy, but a new clarity began forming. She realized this was no ordinary heartbreak. It was a betrayal so deep that it demanded action, not tears alone. Samuel pleaded, but she no longer heard him. Instead, she envisioned a path forward, a life rebuilt on her own strength, not on lies. Somewhere, in the shadows of the night, Adaku smiled faintly, not for joy, but for determination. She would confront Samuel and Amara eventually. And when she did, nothing would be the same. The storm of betrayal had arrived, but she would survive. The night, though cruel, had awakened a new fire within her, a fire that promised resilience, revenge, and the unthinkable decision that would define the rest of her life. By midnight, the hall was silent. Only the faint echoes of music lingered in empty rooms. Adaku returned to her suite, locking the door behind her. She looked at herself in the mirror, the white gown heavy on her shoulders, her face pale but determined. Tears had dried, replaced by a sharp resolve. Samuel's voice, full of guilt, echoed in her mind, but she refused to answer. She needed time to think, to plan, to understand the depths of the betrayal. A thought struck her. Sometimes the unthinkable is the only way to reclaim power. Her mind raced with ideas, none of them easy, all of them daring. She poured herself a glass of water and sat by the window, looking out at the moonlit garden where the night's chaos had begun. Somewhere in the distance, crickets chirped, but their sound could not drown the pounding in her heart. Adaku understood one truth clearly: life would not go back to normal. Something drastic, something unthinkable, would happen tonight. And when it did, Samuel and Amara would see the consequences of their choices. The wedding might have been ruined, but Adaku was just beginning to rise. The first chapter of a new, suspenseful story had begun, and nothing would ever be the same. Adaku couldn't sleep. Her mind replayed every detail of the night: Samuel's secret glances, Amara's knowing smiles, the hollow words he had whispered. The bouquet on her bed seemed heavier than usual, as if it carried the weight of betrayal. Chika, still sitting quietly beside her, whispered, "Ada, what are you going to do?" Adaku shook her head. "I don't know yet. But I can't just let this go." Her heart pounded with anger and fear, but a part of her mind began to strategize. If she confronted Samuel recklessly, she would humiliate herself. She needed a plan, a way to turn the tables without losing control. Slowly, a thought formed, daring and dangerous. Tonight, everyone believed the wedding had ended perfectly, but that illusion had to be shattered. Adaku didn't want revenge for herself, not exactly, but she wanted justice. Samuel had betrayed her trust. Amara had betrayed family loyalty. And somewhere in the shadows of her heart, she felt that, if she acted wisely, she could reveal the truth in a way no one would forget. The night stretched on. The moon cast silver light into the room, reflecting off her white gown. Adaku clenched her fists. The world would see Samuel and Amara for what they truly were, and she would smile the entire time. The next morning, the wedding hall was quiet. Adaku walked slowly through the rooms, pretending to gather her thoughts, while her mind worked like a machine. Samuel was downstairs, arranging final payments with the caterers, oblivious to the storm brewing in his wife's mind. Adaku noticed Amara speaking quietly to one of the staff, laughing in a way that made her blood boil. Today, she realized, was still her night. The celebrations hadn't ended completely, and no one suspected that anything was wrong. She smiled politely at guests, masking her inner turmoil. Even Chika seemed uneasy, sensing the tension in every step Adaku took. But Adaku's focus was singular: she would make sure Samuel and Amara faced consequences tonight. She had thought of everything: the timing, the exposure, the shock factor. Nothing was random. Every smile, every gesture, every word she would speak had to be calculated. If she failed, she risked humiliation or worse. But Adaku's heart was steady now, her mind sharp. She was no longer a bride lost in naivety. She had seen betrayal, and she had decided to act. The hall, still glittering with decorations, would soon witness a truth no one would forget. And when it did, Adaku would watch, unblinking. As justice unfolded, Samuel and Amara spent the afternoon in quiet preparation, unaware that the true focus of the night was not their joy, but Adaku's plan. Adaku sat by the window, watching them laugh together, each gesture reminding her of the deceit she had endured. Her anger was tempered with precision. She knew she could not confront them too early. The moment had to be perfect. Every guest still believed this was the happiest wedding day. Their ignorance was Adaku's ally. Slowly, she moved through the hall, inspecting flowers, candles, and tables, imagining the reactions she could provoke with careful timing. Chika watched silently, both nervous and intrigued. "Ada, are you sure about this?" she asked quietly. Adaku smiled faintly, her gaze sharp. "I am. Tonight, everyone will see the truth." She began planning the smallest details, the subtle ways she could orchestrate confusion, expose betrayal, and turn celebration into revelation. As evening approached, her mind raced with possibilities, each more daring than the last. The guests had no idea that behind the smiles and laughter, a quiet storm had formed. Samuel and Amara would be blindsided, and Adaku, calm and collected, would be the one holding the power. Tonight, the wedding would change forever, and the unthinkable would unfold exactly as she intended. As guests began trickling in for the evening reception, Adaku moved through the hall with a serene expression, hiding the storm of thoughts inside. Samuel greeted friends, unaware that his every boastful word about the perfect marriage only strengthened Adaku's resolve. Amara floated through the crowd, radiant and confident, oblivious to the careful observation she was under. Adaku noted everything: the way Samuel adjusted his cufflinks when Amara approached, the quiet whisper exchanged between them. The plan in Adaku's mind had solidified. She would not act recklessly. Every step would maximize shock and truth. As the music played and couples danced, she started placing small signals, subtle hints at the food table, slight changes to the seating, adjustments to the lighting. Everything had a purpose, and everything would come together like pieces of a clock. Chika stayed close, eyes wide with nervous excitement. "Ada, are you sure this will work?" Adaku whispered, "It has to. Tonight, justice will be served." They think they are safe, but they are walking into their own undoing. With each passing minute, tension built, both for Adaku and for the audience watching silently in suspense. The hall shimmered with elegance, unaware that the unthinkable was waiting to strike, and that no one, not even Samuel, would leave unscathed. Night fell completely, and the hall glowed under chandeliers. Guests laughed, unaware of the silent storm surrounding them. Samuel smiled at Adaku occasionally, attempting casual conversation, but she remained calm, her eyes sharp, her hands steady. She had waited for this moment. Slowly, she moved toward the main table, her movements deliberate, almost like a dancer rehearsing invisible steps. The drinks had been arranged carefully, the desserts positioned strategically. Every detail mattered. One slip could ruin the impact. Adaku noticed Amara talking to a distant relative, leaning in too closely, unaware of the scrutiny she was under. Samuel adjusted his tie, oblivious to the tension growing like a silent shadow across the hall. Adaku's pulse was steady, but her mind raced with timing. She would wait for the right moment, when laughter and celebration reached its peak, to unleash the truth. Guests clinked glasses, toasts were made, and for a brief moment, everything seemed normal. But behind that normalcy, Adaku's plan was in motion. Each subtle gesture, each calculated step, brought the unthinkable closer. The night had begun in smiles, but it would end in shock. And Adaku, calm and focused, would be the one orchestrating every revelation. DJ music swelled, drawing couples to the dance floor. Samuel led Amara near the center, whispering something that made her laugh lightly. Adaku observed quietly from a corner, her expression serene, but inside, her mind ticked like a clock counting down. She had chosen this precise moment for maximum effect. Every guest, lost in music and chatter, was completely unaware of the drama about to unfold. Adaku subtly signaled Chika, who nodded in understanding. The stage was set. Drinks had been slightly adjusted, desserts subtly moved. The visual arrangements of the hall, the lighting, the decorations, the paths had all been considered. Adaku's heart beat steadily. She felt no fear, only sharp anticipation. Samuel and Amara, so confident and unobservant, continued their little displays of affection, completely blind to the invisible plan building around them. A whisper passed through Adaku's mind. Patience. Timing is everything. She sipped from her glass slowly, pretending to admire the decorations, while every fiber of her being focused on the moment when she would strike. Soon, the hall's laughter and music would collide with chaos, and everyone would see betrayal exposed in the most unthinkable way imaginable. As the clock neared midnight, Adaku felt the thrill of her plan solidifying. Guests were still dancing, glasses raised in celebration, toasts still flowing, and Samuel remained blind to the subtle signs around him. Adaku moved with quiet precision, double-checking her adjustments, the desserts, the seating, the drinks. Chika followed silently, eyes wide with nervous anticipation. Samuel and Amara were caught up in each other, laughing, talking, unaware that their facade was about to shatter. Adaku's heart was steady, her mind sharp. Every step, every arrangement, was designed to reveal the truth in full force. No one would see it coming. No one would forget it. Adaku's smile was faint, polite, but her eyes burned with resolve. This was more than revenge, it was justice. Samuel had betrayed her, Amara had betrayed loyalty, and tonight, under the glittering lights and music, the unthinkable would happen. And when it did, Adaku would be calm, collected, and in control, as all eyes turned toward her to witness the revelation she had meticulously prepared. Finally, the moment arrived. Samuel lifted his glass for a toast, addressing the room with a confident smile. Adaku stood, poised and serene, her gaze fixed on him. She began moving toward the dessert table, subtly adjusting a few last items. Chika watched nervously, sensing the tension radiating from her friend. Guests continued to dance, laugh, and toast, unaware of the brewing storm. Samuel glanced at Amara and smiled, oblivious. And then, with deliberate grace, Adaku stepped forward and whispered softly to Chika, "Now, the unthinkable plan, crafted in silence and patience, was ready to unfold." Every detail, every adjustment, every gesture she had made was aligned perfectly. Tonight, the wedding, the smiles, and the laughter would collide with truth and shock. Samuel and Amara had believed themselves untouchable, but the night was about to prove otherwise. Adaku's heart was calm, her mind clear, and her smile faint but sharp. The unthinkable was about to happen, and when it did, no one would ever forget this wedding. Adaku's heart beat steadily as she moved toward the main table. Everything was in place. Drinks subtly altered, desserts slightly shifted, candles flickering just enough to draw attention. Guests laughed and danced, unaware that the wedding night they believed perfect would soon unravel. Samuel raised his glass for another toast, smiling at Amara, who returned the gaze with confidence. Adaku approached silently, a faint smile on her lips. Timing was everything. She had waited for months, crafting every detail of this plan. With Chika close behind, she began subtly signaling cues, tilting bottles slightly, adjusting silverware, moving a few desserts closer to the main table. Guests thought she was admiring the decor, oblivious to the storm forming around them. Samuel, confident as ever, had no idea that the celebration was about to collapse. Adaku's mind was sharp, her focus unshakable. The unthinkable would unfold soon. Every betrayal, every deceit, every secret glance Samuel and Amara had shared would be exposed in full view. And when it happened, Adaku would remain calm, collected, smiling faintly while chaos erupted around her. Tonight, the wedding night would become unforgettable for everyone. The first hint of chaos came when a guest lifted a glass of wine and took a sip. Suddenly, they spat it out, coughing violently. Others followed, tasting their drinks, only to find the same sour, spoiled liquid. Confused murmurs spread quickly. Samuel's confident smile faltered, and he glanced at Adaku, who remained calm, serene, almost untouchable. Amara's laughter froze mid-air, replaced by panic as she realized something was wrong. Guests began checking food, touching desserts, and whispering frantically. The cupcakes were melting in a strange way, the fruits in the salads looked rotten, and even the carefully prepared appetizers had been altered. Samuel's face turned pale. Adaku moved quietly through the crowd, keeping her smile faint, watching as the panic grew. The elegant hall filled with confusion, whispers turning to shocked murmurs. The guests didn't yet know that the chaos was deliberate, a reflection of the betrayal hiding behind Samuel and Amara's smiles. Adaku's plan had begun. The unthinkable was not just about exposing deceit, it was about teaching them that trust and loyalty could not be broken without consequences. Samuel finally realized that this was not a simple accident. Adaku had orchestrated every detail. Amara ran to Samuel, clutching his arm, whispering frantic apologies. Samuel, pale and shaking, glanced around, realizing the celebration had collapsed. Adaku approached slowly, her eyes calm, her hands poised. Guests whispered, glancing between the bride, the groom, and the ruined feast. Samuel tried to speak, but words failed him. His promises, his smiles, all meaningless now in the face of public humiliation. Adaku's faint smile deepened. She didn't speak yet. She wanted the impact of suspense to sink in. Chika stood quietly beside her, watching the chaos unfold with wide eyes. Samuel and Amara, who had believed themselves untouchable, were now trapped in the consequences of their actions. The hall, once filled with laughter and music, now echoed with shocked gasps, whispered accusations, and the realization that the betrayal had been exposed. Adaku's calmness contrasted sharply with their panic, amplifying the lesson. For months, she had endured deceit, pain, and betrayal. Now, she wielded patience, strategy, and timing as her weapons. The unthinkable had begun. And as the guests turned to watch, Adaku prepared to deliver the final act of her plan, the revelation that would leave Samuel and Amara powerless. Finally, Adaku spoke, her voice clear and steady. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, holding the microphone Chika had discreetly handed her. "This wedding may look perfect, but truth cannot hide forever." The hall went silent. Guests froze, their attention snapping toward her. Samuel's face was pale, sweat forming on his brow. Amara's confident smile wavered. Adaku continued, voice rising slightly. "The drinks, the desserts, the arrangements, they have been altered tonight. Yes, but not by accident. This chaos reflects something much deeper: betrayal, lies, broken trust. Gasps echoed across the hall. Samuel's mouth opened, but no words emerged. Adaku's gaze swept the room. Sometimes, the people we trust the most will hurt us. But the truth has a way of rising, and when it does, justice is served. Her words hit like a hammer. Guests murmured, connecting the dots, realizing that Samuel and Amara had deceived everyone. Adaku's faint smile remained. She was no longer a victim. She was the orchestrator of exposure, patience, and justice. And now, the unthinkable was about to reach its peak. Samuel stumbled forward, voice shaking. Ada, this isn't what you think. His words sounded hollow, almost desperate. Amara tugged at his sleeve, eyes wide. What do you mean? Adaku's gaze was steady, piercing, almost cold. Do you want me to continue? She asked softly. Samuel opened his mouth, but Chika shook her head subtly, signaling him to remain silent. Guests leaned closer, curiosity and shock burning in their eyes. Adaku's calmness contrasted with their panic. The truth, she said, her voice carrying across the hall, is that Samuel has been unfaithful. And Amara. She paused, letting tension build. My cousin has betrayed family loyalty by encouraging it. Silence fell. Samuel's confident persona crumbled. Amara's face paled. The guests murmured in disbelief, some gasping, others whispering furiously. Adaku's plan had worked perfectly. The unthinkable public exposure of betrayal on the wedding night was complete. Samuel and Amara had believed themselves untouchable, but patience, timing, and strategy had proven stronger than deceit. The hall buzzed with chaos and whispers. Adaku's faint smile remained. Tonight, she had reclaimed her power. Samuel sank into a chair, defeated, his voice barely audible. Amara's confidence had vanished completely. Guests, shocked and uneasy, began leaving, some whispering warnings, others gossiping furiously. Adaku walked through the hall, her movements calm, observing the fallout. She felt no joy in their humiliation, only satisfaction that truth and justice had prevailed. Chika walked beside her, proud and amazed. Ada, you did it, she whispered. Adaku nodded faintly. I didn't just act for revenge, she said quietly. I acted for closure, for truth. Samuel and Amara were left with the weight of public exposure, their deceit unraveling before the eyes of everyone they had hoped to impress. And Adaku? She remained poised, calm, and in control. The unthinkable had unfolded, but she had maintained dignity and strength. By the early morning, the hall was nearly empty. Samuel and Amara had retreated, humiliated, while guests whispered about the chaos they had witnessed. Adaku returned to her suite, exhausted but calm. Her heart, which had raced all night, began to settle. She had faced betrayal, humiliation, and heartbreak, yet emerged stronger. Chika followed, smiling. Ada, you were incredible. Calm, collected, fearless, Adaku smiled faintly. Tonight wasn't just about them, she said. It was about me, my strength, my peace. She poured a glass of water and sat by the window, looking out at the moonlit garden where the night storm had begun. For the first time in weeks, she felt relief. Samuel and Amara had lost their masks. Justice, however unorthodox, had been served. And Adaku, finally free of their deceit, could begin to rebuild her life. Months passed. Adaku focused on herself, her career, and her happiness. Samuel and Amara had married later, quietly, but their lives were shadowed by guilt and tension. Guests who had witnessed the wedding night chaos never forgot it. Adaku, however, thrived. She laughed freely, traveled, and found joy in her independence. Her faint smile remained a symbol of strength, patience, and wisdom. She had learned that betrayal could hurt, but strategy, courage, and self-respect could turn the unthinkable into liberation. Adaku's life was no longer defined by deceit, but by the choices she made to reclaim her power and peace. Finally, Adaku met Chinedu, a kind, respectful man who valued honesty above all. He loved her for her strength, resilience, and heart. Their relationship blossomed naturally, culminating in a wedding filled with genuine love and laughter, nothing like the chaos of her past. Adaku wore a radiant gown, smiled freely, and felt complete. Samuel and Amara's past betrayal was a distant memory, their lives shadowed by regret, while she thrived in joy and fulfillment. She had survived heartbreak, orchestrated justice, and reclaimed her life. Adaku realized a powerful truth. When the unthinkable strikes, patience, courage, and self-respect can turn despair into liberation. And somewhere, deep inside, she smiled not for revenge, not for triumph, but for the peace, happiness, and love she finally earned. Asterisk.